Hey again, it's Paul Mehling for acoustic guitar, and today we're going to talk about how to make your practicing more musical. If you're like me, you've probably spent a lot of time in the woodshed burning through exercises, etudes, scales, studies, arpeggios, all of that stuff. And maybe sometimes you feel like you're spinning your wheels and you're not getting anywhere, or maybe you've even felt like you've been at a plateau and you can't get above that. And I'm here to show you some ideas for how to kind of put the music that you're practicing into a musical context. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? But these are some things you may not have considered. First thing I think that would be most helpful if you're at the stage of playing scales and arpeggios, which even at my age, I'm still doing it, you might want to make a rhythm track, something basic like this. Maybe I need a metronome to help me do that better. Just something like that. And you can hear I was having a little bit of trouble there, so I cleaned it up by moving my fingers in my left hand. And you want the rhythm track to be as long as you can make it. 2 minutes is good. That way you'll build up stamina and concentration. And I think that's enough for our demonstration. Another rhythm track that you could make would be maybe something as simple as 2-5-1, if you're familiar with that concept in jazz. That's where if you were in the key of C, you would play a 2 chord, which is D minor 7, a 5 chord, which is G7, resolving to a 1 chord, which would be C7 or C major 7, C7, C major 7. So let's do that again with the rhythm track, only let's make it a little bit faster, please. That's good for now. Another thing that you could do is work on an odd series of chord changes, something that might be a little out of your comfort zone. For me, this is kind of odd, so we're going to increase the speed 4 clicks and give this a go. This is a rhythm track that goes basically 1-4-5-1. That's C to F to G, back to C. Here's example 3. So with example 4, we're going to do another jazz cliche. This is 1-6-2-5. There are plenty of songs in the world, not just jazz tunes, that are built on 1-6-2-5. In the key of C, that's C, A minor 7, D minor 7, and G7, back to C major 7. We're going to do a slight Latin feel, and we're going to slow the tempo down just a little bit. I think we're somewhere around 120. Or if you want to just play it Now, there's a principle in music that you know on an intuitive level that you may not know that you know. And I love pointing these things out to my students when they come to me for lessons. When you play a scale, low notes are generally quieter than high notes. High notes tend to cut. This is why lead instruments are usually higher pitched instruments. And if you've ever tried to play a bass and play a bass solo, or a baritone sax or something, tuba, they have to work a little harder to be heard. The same principle applies to playing a scale. The low notes in the scale are not quite as loud. So there's a natural crescendo, is what I'm trying to say, when you play a scale. Now, I overemphasize that, but just naturally in the world of music, the higher you go, the louder you get. So you can play with this. You can overemphasize it the way I just did by starting quietly. Or you can start loud and fight the natural tendency of musical nature, whatever you want to call it. You can fight that tendency for things to be louder by starting loud and getting quieter as you ascend. So I would recommend playing with that principle as you make music. Guitarists, we're not as fortunate as trumpets and saxophones that have a dynamic range. They can go from loud to soft and loud. They have a dynamic range on a scale of 1 to 10, like all numbers, all the way from 1 to 10. I think a guitar has a dynamic range from 1 to 3 maybe. But we can expand that by learning how to play really loudly or really quietly. And I think that's an unexplored thing you can bring to your musicianship to make it more fun, more musical for you, and more musical for the listener. All right, let's look at example 6, where it's taken from a real musical piece that's using scale movement to give you some ideas or inspiration for how to break out of just playing scales when you're practicing. Once you've got the scales under your fingers, it's fun to explore little things like, or there's a Kreutzer etude that all violin players know. All right, so I'm going to play some goofy ideas just to give you some inspiration about what to play against example 1. So here's some ideas for what to do on example 2. Find that playing over 2-5-1, each note of your scale will either fit in the chord naturally, or it'll be a note that's not in the chord that needs to be resolved by going to the next note in the scale. Usually in jazz, you're only one note away from the note that you need to be on. That's the magic of jazz. You can practice scales in this way by playing arpeggios maybe. You can do all sorts of things, but the idea is to understand each note in your scale and how it fits musically into the chords that you're playing over. I'm going to skip ahead to example 4 now, and I'm going to ask Mr. Metronome to hit it, please. Does that sound familiar? That's a melody right there that you may know. Or here's another thing you could do over the same series of chords. Or just something as simple as So I hope these ideas have unlocked your brain to think outside the box when you're practicing technique. Technique is only good if you have a musical idea to express, and finding those musical ideas within the techniques that you're learning as you're training your fingers to play the scales and to play the arpeggios and to learn all these chords. The idea is to always keep in mind that the goal is music. So have fun with it. Feel free to email me. This is Paul Mehling saying thanks again for acoustic guitar.